Most gardeners think July and August are when the garden starts dying. The lettuce bolts, the spinach disappears, tomatoes stop setting fruit, and entire beds that looked incredible in May start looking exhausted by midsummer. So when the heat arrives, a lot of gardeners just brace for a slow decline and wait for fall. But here's what years of growing through brutal southern and southwestern summers have shown. Heat isn't actually the enemy of your garden. For a specific group of crops, it's exactly the condition they've been waiting for. Some of the most productive gardens out there aren't shaded, babied, or fighting the heat with shade cloth and ice water. They're simply growing the right plants for the season they're actually in. Today, we're counting down 10 crops that don't just tolerate brutal heat, they actually perform better because of it. Some of these crops are already sitting in seed catalogs you've probably scrolled past. Others might be brand new to you. None of them require shade cloth, daily babysitting, or constant watering just to survive. In fact, several of them get easier to grow as the temperature climbs, not harder. By the end of this list, you'll know exactly what to plant so that instead of watching your garden struggle through August, you're harvesting more food than you know what to do with. Let's get into it. At number 10, eggplant. Most gardeners treat eggplant like a delicate, finicky crop, something that needs constant attention to produce anything worth eating. In reality, eggplant comes from tropical and subtropical regions of South and Southeast Asia, and it's built for heat. While tomatoes start dropping blossoms once daytime temperatures push consistently past 90 degrees Fahrenheit, eggplant keeps flowering and setting fruit. Cool spring weather is actually eggplant's biggest obstacle. It grows slowly and sulks until the soil and air both warm up consistently. Once summer heat settles in, growth speeds up dramatically. Varieties like Ichiban, Black Beauty, and Thai eggplant handle extreme heat especially well. The main thing eggplant needs is consistent moisture at the root zone, since heat combined with drought stress is what actually slows it down, not the heat itself. Mulching heavily around the base helps maintain that moisture without daily watering. Once eggplant gets going in real summer heat, it's one of the steadiest producers in the entire garden. And the next crop on this list takes that same heat-loving advantage even further, by surviving conditions that send most peppers into shutdown. At number 9, hot peppers. Most pepper varieties slow down once temperatures climb into the mid-90s. Pollen becomes less viable, blossoms drop, and fruit set stalls out, especially in bell peppers and other sweet varieties. Hot peppers behave differently. Varieties like habanero, cayenne, Thai chili, and Scotch bonnet originate from genuinely tropical climates, and they hold on to fruit production in heat that would shut down a bell pepper plant completely. That doesn't mean hot peppers are immune to extreme heat. During the most brutal heat waves, above 100 degrees Fahrenheit, even heat-loving peppers can pause and drop blossoms temporarily. The fix is simple. A little afternoon shade during the worst heat spikes keeps fruit set steady instead of stalling out completely. Outside of those extremes, hot peppers will keep producing through summer conditions that frustrate gardeners trying to grow bells or sweet peppers in the same bed. They're also remarkably drought-tolerant once established, which makes them one of the lowest maintenance crops on this entire list. And speaking of crops that keep producing when other vegetables quit, the next one on our list does exactly that, just in pod form instead of pepper form. At number 8, yard-long beans, also called asparagus beans. Most home gardeners have never grown these, but they're one of the best-kept secrets for surviving a brutal summer. Regular green beans are notorious for stalling out once daytime heat consistently pushes into the mid-90s. Yard-long beans don't have that problem. They're native to tropical Asia and were bred for exactly these conditions. Vigorous vines that keep flowering and setting long, slender pods, often 1 to 3 feet in length, right through the hottest stretch of summer. They climb readily on a trellis or fence, which keeps the pods clean and easy to harvest. The flavor is similar to a green bean, just slightly firmer, and they hold up well in stir-fries. The biggest mistake gardeners make with this crop is planting it too early. Yard-long beans need warm soil to germinate well, so waiting until the soil has truly warmed up in late spring or early summer produces much stronger results than rushing the planting date. Once established, they'll often keep producing well into early fall, long after regular bean plants have given up. And the next crop on our list takes heat tolerance from the bean family into a completely different shape. At number 7, Armenian cucumbers. Despite the name, these aren't technically cucumbers at all. They're a type of melon, closely related to cantaloupe, that's grown and eaten like a cucumber. That botanical difference matters more than you'd think, because it's exactly why this crop handles heat so much better than a standard slicing cucumber. Regular cucumbers are notorious for turning bitter and stressed once temperatures spike, especially with inconsistent watering. Armenian cucumbers stay mild, sweet, and crisp even through extended heat waves that would ruin a typical cucumber harvest. The long, ribbed fruit can grow over a foot in length, and the vines are vigorous climbers, so a trellis turns this into a serious vertical producer instead of a sprawling space hog. They also tend to shrug off the powdery mildew and pest pressure that often hits regular cucumbers hardest during peak summer humidity. For gardeners who've given up on cucumbers because every summer crop turns bitter by July, this is the heat season replacement that actually works. And the next crop flips the script entirely, because instead of fruit, it's one of the few leafy greens that actually wants brutal heat. At number 6, Malabar spinach. If you've ever watched your spinach bolt and disappear within 2 weeks of summer arriving, this crop solves that problem completely. Malabar spinach isn't true spinach at all. It's a tropical vining plant that's used the same way in the kitchen, but it behaves nothing like cool season greens. True spinach can't survive sustained heat above the mid-80s. Malabar spinach barely gets going until temperatures are consistently warm, and it actually struggles in cool spring weather. It needs heat to thrive. The thick, glossy leaves have a mild flavor and a slightly succulent texture, and they hold up well in soups, stir-fries, and sautés, unlike true spinach, which wilts down to almost nothing. Give it something to climb, a trellis, fence, or even a tomato cage, and it will reward you with continuous harvests of fresh leaves through the hottest stretch of summer, right when your other greens have completely given up. The only thing Malabar spinach can't tolerate is cold. It dies back completely at the first real frost. But during peak summer, it's one of the most dependable leafy crops you can grow. We're officially halfway through the list. Eggplant, hot peppers, yard-long beans, Armenian cucumbers, and Malabar spinach. Quick question, which of these crops surprised you most so far? Let me know below, because gardeners in this community always introduce me to crops I've never even considered growing. Now let's get into the final 5, because these next crops might be the most heat-resilient plants on this entire list. At number 5, southern peas, also known as cowpeas, black-eyed peas, Crowder peas, or purple hull peas depending on the variety. Forget delicate. This is one of the toughest crops you can put in the ground. Southern peas are legumes, which means they actually pull nitrogen from the air and add it back into your soil as they grow, improving your garden for whatever you plant next. They thrive in conditions that stop green beans cold, scorching afternoons, dry stretches between waterings, and poor or sandy soil that other vegetables struggle in. Once established, they need surprisingly little babysitting. The pods can be harvested young and cooked like green beans, or left to mature and dried for long-term storage, giving you flexibility most crops don't offer. For gardeners in Texas, the Deep South, or anywhere summers regularly hit the high 90s and beyond, southern peas are one of the most forgiving and productive crops you can put in the ground. And the next crop on our list takes that same heat and drought resilience underground, literally. At number 4, sweet potatoes. Most gardeners think sweet potatoes are a fall crop. They're wrong. Sweet potatoes are actually a summer crop with a fall harvest. The real story is what happens underground all summer long. Sweet potatoes need a long stretch of consistent heat, generally 90 to 100 plus frost-free days, to produce a strong harvest, which is exactly why North Carolina, the top sweet potato growing state in the country, sees such reliable harvests year after year. The sprawling vines actually use heat to their advantage, growing aggressively and shading out weeds while the tubers develop underneath. Once established, sweet potatoes are remarkably drought-tolerant, often outperforming regular potatoes during extended dry spells, because their root system runs deeper and handles moisture stress far better. The biggest mistake gardeners make is planting too early. Sweet potato slips need warm soil to take off, so waiting until the soil has truly heated up produces a noticeably stronger harvest than rushing the planting date in spring. Come fall, before the first frost, you dig up the reward, a crop that spent the entire brutal summer quietly building pounds of food underground while you barely had to think about it. And the next crop on our list might be the most overlooked heat performer of them all. At number 3, roselle, sometimes called cranberry hibiscus or Jamaican sorrel. Most American gardeners have never heard of this plant, But in the Caribbean, parts of Africa, and across Southeast Asia, it's a summer staple, and for good reason. Roselle is a tropical annual hibiscus that needs a genuinely long, hot growing season, generally 100 or more frost-free days, to fully mature, which means the brutal heat that shuts down cool season crops is exactly what this plant is waiting for. The plant itself is strikingly beautiful, with reddish stems and foliage, but the real reward comes from the bright red calices that form after flowering. Those calices get harvested, dried, and steeped into the deep red hibiscus tea found in stores, or used in jams, syrups, and the chilled drink known across Latin America and the Caribbean as agua de Jamaica. Roselle is also remarkably drought-tolerant once established, asking for very little once the heat of summer takes hold. For gardeners in Florida, Texas, the Gulf Coast, or anywhere else summers run long and hot, Roselle turns the most punishing part of the growing season into one of its most productive. And the next crop on our list might be the single most heat-defiant leafy green that exists. At number 2, molokhia, also called Egyptian spinach or jute mallow. This is one of the most heat-tolerant leafy greens out there, and almost no one in the US is growing it. While lettuce bolts and spinach disappears the moment summer heat arrives, molokhia is just getting started. It's a staple green across Egypt, the Middle East, and parts of West Africa, where summer temperatures routinely exceed 100 degrees Fahrenheit, and the plant simply doesn't slow down. The leaves have a mild, slightly tangy flavor, and when cooked down, they develop a thick, almost velvety texture, similar to okra, that's traditionally used as the base for a rich, garlicky soup served over rice. Beyond the heat tolerance, molokhia is fast-growing and forgiving. It tolerates inconsistent watering far better than true spinach, and a single planting can be harvested repeatedly throughout the summer as new leaves regenerate. For gardeners tired of watching their greens disappear by June, this is a crop that turns the hottest months of the year into a genuine harvest season instead of a dead zone. And that brings us to the number 1 crop on today's list, the plant that might be the single most heat-resilient vegetable you can grow in a US backyard. And finally, taking the top spot, okra. If there's one vegetable that proves brutal heat is an advantage and not a problem, it's this one. Okra is a member of the mallow family, originally from hot regions of Africa, and it genuinely performs best in temperatures between 85 and 95 degrees Fahrenheit, with many varieties continuing to thrive even above that. While most of the garden is wilting in a heat wave, okra is often putting on its strongest growth of the entire season. It's also one of the most drought-tolerant vegetables you can grow once it's established, with a deep root system that shrugs off the dry stretches that stress out shallow-rooted crops. The real key to a massive okra harvest comes down to one simple habit. Harvest the pods young and often, ideally every couple of days, once production ramps up. Removing pods regularly signals the plant to keep flowering and producing, while letting pods grow large and tough on the plant slows everything down. Treated this way, a handful of okra plants can produce pods continuously from midsummer all the way until the first frost, turning the most brutal stretch of the growing season into the most productive one. That's exactly why okra earns the number 1 spot on today's list. So, let's recap everything we covered today. Eggplant, hot peppers, yard-long beans, Armenian cucumbers, Malabar spinach, southern peas, sweet potatoes, roselle, molokhia, and okra, the most heat-resilient crop on the entire list. Here's the real takeaway from today's list. Brutal summer heat doesn't have to mean a struggling garden or an empty harvest basket. It just means it's time to grow plants that are built for those conditions instead of fighting to keep cool season crops alive past their season. That's the whole idea behind this channel. You don't need more effort, more equipment, or more time in the garden to get a bigger harvest. You just need to grow the right plant for the season you're actually in. Once you start matching your crops to your climate instead of working against it, summer stops being the season your garden struggles and starts being the season it thrives. Now I'd love to hear from you. Which of these crops were you most surprised to see on this list? Was it okra finally getting its due credit, the hidden gem that is molokhia, or maybe roselle, a plant you've genuinely never heard of before today? Let me know in the comments below. And if this is your first time on Easy Harvest Gardens, here's what this channel is actually about. Every technique on this channel comes from real growing seasons and real results, nothing else. If that's the kind of gardening channel you want in your corner, hit subscribe and turn on notifications, because in our next video, we're flipping this entire list around. 10 vegetables that shut down the moment summer heat arrives, so you know exactly what to avoid planting in the middle of July and what to plant instead. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next garden.